Hey, what's up, guys? Today, I want to talk about my favorite literary villains. I was watching videos of other book reviewers on YouTube, and I came across one by Murphy Napier, which I will link in the description below, where she talks about her favorite literary villains, and I thought that's a good idea. I better do that. So I'm doing my favorite villains top 5 list today. Also, I've got a brand new intro for my channel, which I'm excited about that I made up. Let me know what you think. You're going to see it. Okay, so top 5 favorite villains. Number 5, I struggled with this one a little bit. I had a few options I could go for, but I ultimately decided to go for Kurtz from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. And the reason I chose Kurtz is he's mysterious, and it's natural for human beings to fear the unknown. And the whole book of Heart of Darkness, you're building up this larger-than-life villain, Kurtz, and you don't know anything about him, and he's spoken of with awe and reverence and fear. And when you finally get to him, he's this hyper-intelligent, capable man who has totally gone insane, totally lost his mind, and set himself up as a kind of god to this local tribe. And I think that's another thing. Insanity is another thing that fascinates me because it's something we can't really understand, and it's another aspect of the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing your mind. And the idea of someone who's so intelligent, so capable, totally becoming detached from reality is a very terrifying thought, and I found him a really scary villain, not just in the movie adaptations, but in the book itself. So he's my number 5 choice. Number 4 is Nurse Ratched from Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Now, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a fantastic book, but I can't ever think of hating a character in fiction more than I've hated Nurse Ratched. She is the nurse who looks over the psychiatric ward and totally mentally abuses and controls these helpless patients. There's kind of 3 things that I think make Nurse Ratched a great villain. And one of them is the cruelty of taking advantage of people who are at their most vulnerable. These mental patients they need help. They're in a bad position. Some of them are there voluntarily asking for help. And rather than help them, she tortures them mentally and controls them and does horrible things to them. And so that's the cruelty aspect of it. The second aspect that I think makes her a great villain is the irony of her position. She's a nurse. She's supposed to be helping people. She's supposed to be bringing good health and happiness into people's lives. Instead, she's making them miserable. And the irony of that, where you have someone who's supposed to be good, doing bad, is always a good thing, good recipe for a villain. And then the third thing that I think is interesting about her character is the pettiness of it. You know, you have some villains who are trying to take over the world and rule and gain power over all humankind and rule the world, and that's fair enough. You know, that's something worth doing a lot for because that's a big deal to rule the world. She's not trying to rule the world. She just wants a little slice of power over this psych ward, this minuscule, insignificant psych ward in this one little hospital, and that's what she does all these terrible things for, is for this tiny little bit of power that doesn't matter at all. And that pettiness is what I think makes her such a despicable, hateful villain. Number 3 is, this is going to be a controversial one. I'm picking Lucifer from Milton's Paradise Lost on this one. Now, Lucifer is supposed to be the villain of the piece, but Milton casts him as the protagonist as well, so you see things from his point of view. We're all familiar with the line, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But there are a lot of other lines in there that indicate it's not really about ruling, it's about being free. There's a line where he says, we prefer hard liberty to servile pomp. Lucifer considers himself a freedom fighter. He regards heaven as a tyranny. He regards himself as a slave. He thinks it's a gilded cage. And he doesn't want to live in a life of comfort and ease where he doesn't have free will, where he doesn't have the choice to do as he wants. He'd rather be free in a bad situation than be imprisoned in a good situation. And so you see this throughout the story. And he does bad things along the way, but I've always found him very sympathetic. And I know that Philip Pullman, the author of His Dark Materials trilogy, agrees with me on this. It's hard not to sympathize with Lucifer in this book. And I find him kind of a romantic Byron-esque hero in that sense. So I'm a libertarian myself. I find the idea of being subject to a dictatorship or a despotism as Lucifer portrays heaven as being and the thing that he wants to escape from, I find that idea terrible. So to me, Lucifer from Paradise Lost will always be a libertarian folk hero. Number 2, Number 2 is Steerpike from the Gormenghast trilogy by Mervyn Peake. This is a little bit more obscure book, but I've talked about it before on this channel. I think it's a fantastic read. And basically, Steerpike is a kitchen boy who's born into this huge bureaucracy of a kingdom in one castle. And there's no social mobility. He's essentially assigned to a low caste system for his life, and he decides that's not good enough for him. He wants to break out of it and do something more with his life and rise the ranks into a position of power. And in the early stages of the book, you find yourself sympathizing with him and admiring his ambition, but he's a complete monster. He's a complete monster. Everything he does is self-serving and cruel, and he unhesitatingly hurts other people to aid his rise to the top. Someone on TV Tropes said that he was the only character in fiction he could think of who everything he says, everything he does has an ulterior motive. And by the end of the second book, I find myself just joyously rooting against Steerpike. He's such an evil character. And not many people know about him, but it's such a great character. You guys should read that book. And then finally, my number 1 choice for villain is Inspector Javert from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. Victor Hugo is my all-time favorite writer. Some of his novels are my favorite novels of all time, and Javert is one of his best characters. Now, what makes Javert so good, I think, is I don't like these heroes, I don't like these villains who are just evil for the sake of being evil, who just cackle evilly. I'm going to do so many bad things. It's going to be my way or the highway, and there's no motivation there. It's not human. It's just evil for the sake of being evil. I find that kind of boring. Javert's motivations are very clear and very complex. He's a legal positivist, which means that he thinks that the law is absolute. Anyone who breaks the law is absolutely bad, and it's his job to enforce the law. So he spends the entire book doggedly pursuing the hero Jean Valjean, who stole a loaf of bread many years ago, and is trying to make him pay for his crime. And I like that he's a man of principle. His principles are misguided. He's wrong, but he's got his principles that he lives his life by, and he's going to follow them to the end. And that is a really, in some circumstances, that would be a very admirable trait. In this case, he happens to be misguided and doing the wrong thing, and so he's a villain. But I think he's a very relatable, very human villain, and I like that a lot about him. He's my favorite. And then at the end of the book, of course, he's forced to confront the fact that this whole worldview he has, that he's been living his whole life for, might be mistaken. And what's he going to do about that? That's a great moment of conflict and a villain that has a lot of depth. So Inspector Javert from Les Miserables, my all-time favorite literary villain. Let me know what you guys thought. If you agree with me, if you disagree, if you have other villains that you'd like to see highlighted. If you like the intro or think it's too long, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.